Excellencies, distinguished delegates, can we start the meeting? Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We will begin this afternoon with our consideration of Agenda Item 3, consideration of the Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development, and of the commitments contained in the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. I now have the pleasure to invite Mr. Srinivas Tata, Director of Social Development Division of ESCAP, to deliver a presentation on this agenda item. Mr. Tata, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to present an overview for Agenda Item 3 on the draft Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards implementation of the Program of Action of the ICPD and of the commitments contained in the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. Next slide, please. At the 6th Asian and Pacific Population Conference held in 2013, ESCAP member state reviews progress and gaps in the implementation on the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development, and identified priority actions to address a broad set of challenges and opportunities related to population and development in the Asia-Pacific region. After deliberation, the conference adopted the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population Development by a majority vote. In the Ministerial Declaration, governments identified policy directions and priority actions in 11 areas: poverty eradication and employment, health, sexual and reproductive health, services and rights, education, gender equality and women's empowerment, adolescents and young people, aging, international migration, urbanization and international migration, population and sustainable development, and data and statistics. These priority actions align closely with the SDGs. In addition, the Ministerial Declaration called for regular monitoring and evaluation of progress towards the continuing implementation of the POA at the ICPD and the recommendations contained in the Ministerial Declaration. Further, the Ministerial Declaration called for strengthening of capacities to generate, analyze, and disseminate population data and use the data for formulation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of population and development policies. Next slide, please. At the 2018 midterm review of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development in Asia-Pacific held in 2018, ESCAP, in close collaboration with UNFPA, developed a draft indicator framework for monitoring the implementation of the Ministerial Declaration and the POA of ICPD in the region and presented it to the member states. The indicator framework followed the 11 priority directions of the Ministerial Declaration and identified the relevant SDG indicators which were aligned to them. At the midterm review, ESCAP member states recognized the importance of a region-specific monitoring framework. They also recommended to the Secretariat to develop, in close collaboration with UNFPA, the draft framework further. They also recommended that the revised framework be submitted to the Economic and Social Commission in Asia-Pacific for its consideration before the 6th session of the Committee on Social Development. Next slide, please. In follow-up to this recommendation from the midterm review, ESCAP and UNFPA revised the framework further and mapped the priority actions of the Ministerial Declaration against the relevant SDGs and their related indicators. In addition, ESCAP and UNFPA organized an expert group meeting with participants from different countries in Asia and the Pacific in their expert capacity to review the framework, and their suggestion helped to revise it further. The revised framework was then submitted to the 76th session of the Commission for its consideration. The Commission requested the Committee on Social Development at its 6th session to review the framework with a view to providing advice on this follow-up as appropriate. Next slide, please. The monitoring framework. focuses on the key priority actions of the Ministerial Declaration and links them to the related SDGs. It recognizes the need to avoid duplicating efforts and adding them to the reporting burden of member states, and therefore focuses primarily on SDG indicators. It is voluntary, and member states can decide on their own if they wish to follow it for the next review of the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development at the 7th Asia Pacific Population Conference. By using this framework, reporting on any progress regarding the Ministerial Declaration in the future will be more coherent. Next slide, please. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, people are at the center of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Population and development concerns are therefore the core of the 2030 Agenda. And the achievement of the Population and Development Agenda will contribute to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and vice versa. This framework comprises 85 indicators, including 76 indicators drawn from the Sustainable Development Goal Indicator Framework, and 9 additional ones from other internationally agreed frameworks and global databases, which include the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, the Regional Action Framework on Civil Registration and Vital Statistics and data produced by the Population Division and the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UNESCO, WHO, and the International Labour Organization on the basis of national official data. The framework is proposed for future use by member states for voluntary regular monitoring and evaluation of progress towards the POA of ICPD and commitments contained in the Ministerial Declaration. Therefore, monitoring the implementation of APC through this framework, including by building capacities among member states on the priority actions of the APMD, will contribute to the achievement of the goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda. So, next slide, please. Distinguished delegates, excellencies, we are pleased to present this indicator framework to you today, and we look forward to your favorable consideration to our request to review and endorse this indicator framework, noting the fact that it is drawn from agreed indicator frameworks and it is voluntary in nature. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tata, for your comprehensive overview of the proposed monitoring framework for the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. The presentation showed the process of developing this framework and highlighted the importance of data and research for evidence policy making in the field of population and development. The background document for this agenda item is the Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework for Monitoring Progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action for the International Conference on Population and Development, and of the commitments contained in the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development, as put forward in document SCAP/CSD/2020/2. As mentioned by Mr. Tata in his presentation, a draft monitoring framework was already presented to representatives of members and associate members at the midterm review of the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development in 2018. In the recommendations of that meeting, members and associated members stressed the importance of a region-specific monitoring framework and recommended that the Secretariat, in cooperation with the United Nations Population Fund, further develop a regional monitoring framework to monitor the program of action of the International Conference on Population and Development and the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development as appropriate in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. They further recommended that the framework be submitted to the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific for its consideration before the 6th session of the Committee on Social Development. Subsequently, The monitoring framework was revised jointly by the Secretariat and UNFPA and reviewed by experts from Asia and the Pacific at an expert group meeting in September 2019. The Commission, at its 76th session, took note of the revised monitoring framework and requested the committee to review it with a view to providing advice on the follow-up as appropriate. Today, the monitoring framework is presented to members and associate members for endorsement as a tool to support further reviews and appraisals of the ministerial declaration and the program of action. With this, I wish to invite distinguished delegates from the member states to take the floor and share their views on this agenda item. The floor is now open for speakers. I recognize the distinguished delegation of Philippines seeking the floor. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson. As I am speaking for the first time in this session as head of the Philippine delegation, the Philippine delegation sincerely extends our congratulations on your election, and we commit our active participation in the attainment of the objectives and agenda of this important session. Madam Chair, speaking on agenda item 3, the Philippines recognizes the need to advance further the goals and objectives of the ICPD Program of Action as a critical component of the 2030 Agenda. The Philippines endorses and supports the adoption and wide use of the Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action and the commitments contained in the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. We affirm the relevance and importance of these indicators to guide initiatives in pursuing the ICPD agenda within the context of inclusive sustainable development. Madam Chair, to ensure the alignment of our indicator system with the regional indicator framework, we have just updated the results matrices of the Philippine Development Plan, which are substantially anchored on the SDG indicators. More importantly, to ensure that these indicator frameworks are used efficiently and can effectively inform evidence-based planning and policymaking, we continue to enhance our statistical and database systems. Currently, we are conducting our census on population and housing to ensure updated demographic and socioeconomic data by early 2021. To improve decision-making processes at the local level, we enacted the Community-Based Monitoring System Act, which mandates all local government units to establish the CBMS or Local Database Evidence-Based Development Planning, Program Implementation, and Impact Monitoring Systems. Our government is committed to strengthen the capacity foremost of the Philippine Statistics Authority and other national government agencies and academic institutions in generating, analyzing, and disseminating reliable and disaggregated population data. Greater investments are made for the conduct of various periodical surveys such as the National Demographic Health Survey, the Labor Force Survey, and the National Migration Survey. We continue to improve our administrative data collection, such as the Field Health Services Information System of the Department of Health, civil registration and vital statistics, and other administrative databases and information systems at all levels. We also have the Listahanan or the National Household Targeting System for Poverty Reduction, which is an information management system that identifies who and where the poor are nationwide. And currently, the system used for the selection of qualified household beneficiaries of our Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program. Madam Chairperson, the Philippine government is committed to champion the Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework. We all recognize the impact of the pandemic that we are now facing, not only on the health and economic condition of our people, but also on their sexual and reproductive health and their ability to access much needed information and services in this regard. Recent international and local studies have shown the serious impact of this pandemic on population processes and outcomes across vulnerable countries, including the Philippines. Without united and coordinated actions among various countries, this pandemic will definitely erode or reverse the gains of implementation. Guided by this indicator framework, we will strive to protect the gains and advance the ICPD goals and objectives in the country. With a resilient economy, we shall continue to mobilize national and local institutions to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health information and services, despite the restrictions imposed by community quarantines. We thank you, Madam Chairperson.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Philippines for the information shared with this committee, as well as the expressed support for the indicator framework and the commitments of ministerial declaration and the program of action. In the speakers list, I recognize the delegation of Maldives as the next speaker. And following Maldives, we have Japan registered to speak via virtual means. So following Maldives, it will be Japan. Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Excellencies, colleagues, and distinguished delegates. On behalf of the Maldives delegation, I wish to express our sincere appreciation for the comprehensive presentation and for the substantive report issued under this agenda item for our consideration. The government of Maldives recognizes this important initiative of having an integrated framework to ensure the well-being of people as an essential step in development. The pandemic has further highlighted that timely identification and intervention is crucial to address the needs of the most vulnerable and marginalized. It also allows better policy design and implementation, better analysis and participation by all stakeholders, as well as better coordination. Social protection mechanisms and data gathering mechanisms enabled key policy interventions during this acute social and economic crisis we had to face due to the pandemic. It further highlighted the need to strengthen and enhance these mechanisms further and paved way for evidence-based decision-making through better data collection, management, and dissemination. On population and development, the Maldives has undertaken a comprehensive assessment of gender statistics that examined both data and statistical capacity gaps. The assessment also aimed at providing an overview of current production, coordination, and communication of gender statistics in the Maldives statistical system, and we will be able to measure the gender indicators required by the framework. We recognize the importance of addressing the current data gaps. We are working to ensure availability of data, improving systematic collection and management of data, especially disaggregated data with a focus on disaggregation by age, sex, locality, persons with disabilities, and other vulnerabilities. As a small island state, our challenges are numerous. We need your assistance and support in the areas of capacity building, building effective data systems, producing timely and relevant data, and sharing data in meaningful ways. The government of Maldives gives full commitment to provide required data for the indicators. We also take this opportunity to thank UNESCAP and other collaborating partners for the support you have provided us. It is our desire to continue working together to further cooperation to ensure that the framework will be used to identify those who were furthest behind and develop appropriate policies and interventions to leave no one behind. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Maldives for sharing the best practices and challenges and also highlighting the request for capacity support for small island countries. I now recognize the distinguished delegation of Japan who will join us on the Kudo platform, to be followed by the distinguished delegation of China. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So, regarding this document, we congratulate this approach to use SDGs indicators for the monitoring of ministerial declaration. This will strengthen the convergence of our efforts. One observation is that the framework of SDGs and ministerial declaration is not identical. So I find some SDGs indicators which are used in several thematic areas of ministerial declaration. So considering that usage of indicator in several thematic areas are allowed, we would like to propose that the indicator 3.4.1 and 5.4.1 will be also included in the thematic area of aging, the thematic area G. 3.4.1 is mortality rate attributed to cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, or chronic respiratory disease, which is an important point to improve the health of older persons. Indicator 5.4.1 is proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic and care work by sex, age, and location. This is important based on the fact that in the Asia and Pacific region, there is enormous pressure of family members to take care for their family elderly. So this is my comment. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Japan who has highlighted certain extra level of commitments and indicators, which, as we were repeatedly saying from the Secretariat as well, all on voluntary basis to be added to national policy frameworks. But thank you again for enlightening the forum on these issues. May I now invite the distinguished delegate from China to be followed by the distinguished delegate from India, who will join us virtually. China, you have, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Dear colleagues, Asia-Pacific region is home to more than 60% of the world population. In the context of the ongoing pandemic, it faces new challenges in population and development. In this regard, countries in Asia-Pacific region need to strengthen cooperation to work together to address them. China believes that we should steadfastly hold that the government should be independently responsible for its own challenges on population development. Countries should formulate and implement population development policies appropriate to their own national conditions, taking into account their demographic conditions and stage of economic social development. We should steadfastly promote the equal access to public services by accelerating the realization of public education, labor, employment, entrepreneurship, medical medical care, public culture, and sports. For all, conditions will be created for the comprehensive human development. We should steadfastly strengthen exchanges and cooperation at the international and regional levels. Countries and the international community should continue to strengthen exchange of experiences and policy dialogue, adhere to multilateralism, increase support for developing countries. Madam Chairperson, China's delegation has taken note of the efforts of UN SCAP Secretariat to provide an Asia-Pacific indicator framework on progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action of ICPD and of the commitments contained in the Ministerial Declaration. China is of the view that the Asia-Pacific region is highly diversified, with great economic, social, cultural differences among countries, and that based on their own national conditions and taking into account voluntary principles, the indicator framework could be used as an optional tool. Countries can continue to strengthen exchanges and discussion on the indicator framework in the specialized fields and at the committee sessions in the future. China has made active exploration and accumulated good practices in the field of population through the unremitting efforts of the Chinese government and people. China has effectively brought the epidemic under control, improve the health of these people. And China is ready to work with the international community to implement the 2030 agenda and to promote the building of a community of shared future for mankind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the distinguished delegate of China. Of course, the countries to promote ICPD commitments as nationally appropriate and on voluntary basis has been the underlying principle that this committee work has been discussed so far, and I believe the delegations will continue to reiterate so. So now I have the distinguished delegate from India joining us online, to be followed by the distinguished delegation from Bhutan once again to join us online. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam. Honorable Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. India is continuing its steady progress in implementing the POA and realizing the vision of the ICPD and in achieving the SDGs. While the COVID-19 pandemic has slackened the pace of progress around the world, including in India, the Government of India accords very high priority in terms of policy and financial allocations to the health and education sector, as well as the other social sectors important for achieving the said goals. Budget allocations to social services now stand in excess of 7% of the GDP. Monitoring of progress of implementation of the SDGs has received priority attention at national and subnational levels. The National Indicator Framework adopted for capturing progress on SDGs is an elaborate one comprising about 300 indicators and is thoroughly customized in keeping with the outcomes of program implementation and availability of data across the country. At present, no Tier 2 and Tier 3 indicators are included in the framework. As and when more data becomes available, such indicators can be appropriately included through the regular review mechanism which is enforced. Regular compilation of data and reporting of progress on the National Indicator Framework is taking place. Gradually, more and more indicators are being reported upon according to increasing availability of data. National monitoring of progress has been taken forward to the subnational and local levels with the regular reporting on the India SDG Index, spearheaded by the NITI Aayog. The index is constructed on select indicators on which comparable data are available across the country. Since subnational governments are rated and ranked according to the SDG Index, program implementation on the ground has been very positively impacted across various sectors. Provincial governments are in the process of devising and adopting state indicator frameworks and district indicator frameworks, which is leading to localization of national indicators and alignment of state and local monitoring systems with national and global goals. Considering India's vast diversity, it has been a challenging as well as rewarding exercise in terms of active pursuit of global visions of development, including that of ICPD. Deliberations around the indicators have also provided unique opportunities to build up awareness and accountability among the key stakeholders around issues of development, implementation, and performance. The draft Asia Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the ICPD and the commitments contained in the ASEAN and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population Development contains a very useful selection of indicators to be adopted by the countries in the region. Many of these indicators are already either part of India's National Indicator Framework and the SDG India Index, or represented there by comparable alternative indicators. There is also the possibility of several more indicators from the proposed Asia Pacific Indicator Framework being included in coming years as more and more data become available. The Government of India sets great stores by monitoring of global goals and development of instruments and tools for the purpose. Therefore, India appreciates the initiative to adopt the Asia Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the ICPD Program of Action and of the commitments contained in the ASEAN and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. Thank you, Madam Chair, and we from India wish the initiative very best of luck. Thanks again.
Thank you, India, for your support and sharing the experience on enhanced policy and financial commitments, both at national and subnational level, and also the indication of gradual expansion of those commitments and indicators. I have the pleasure of now inviting the distinguished delegation of Bhutan to join us on the Kudo platform, to be followed by the distinguished delegation of Bangladesh, once again on the virtual mode. Bhutan, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. ICPD has been an important instrument in improving lives of our people since its landmark adoption in 1994. We deeply appreciate and support the efforts put in by UNESCAP in bringing up the revised Asia Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development. Madam Chair, the Royal Government of Bhutan as a signatory to the ICPD, the goals of the ICPD have always been the integral parts of our successive national 5-year development plans, including the current 12 5-year plan. Correspondingly, Bhutan has immensely benefited from the ICPD commitments. Our average life expectancy at birth has significantly increased from 66 years in 1994 to 70.2 years at present. Maternal mortality ratio has decreased from 380 in 1994 to 89 per 100,000 live births, and child mortality rate has substantially reduced from 96.9 to 34.1 per 1,000 live births during the same period. The total fertility rate has declined from 5.6 in 1994 to 1.7 in 2017, and poverty rate has also reduced from 23% in 2007 to 8.2% in 2017. However, we are not spared by a plethora of challenges spanning from our country's topographical features to triple burden of diseases. Non-communicable diseases are increasing at the backdrop of prevalent communicable diseases. We also face a shortage of health workers, difficult access to essential vaccines and drugs due to small economies of scale. As we graduate from least developing country to lower middle income country by 2023, the transition would be a challenge at the backdrop of dwindling donor support. As such, global, regional, and national health stewardship would be vital in addressing these evolving challenges. Finally, with a robust system of monitoring progress on priority actions, it presents a unique opportunity for the member states to take stock of the achievements of the past and improve the services, thereby achieving national as well as the global health goals. This would be an important thrust to strengthen health management information system in the country to intensify its efforts towards making available the data for evidence-based policy and decision making. Therefore, Royal Government of Bhutan fully supports and endorses the framework of monitoring program of action for ICPD. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Bhutan for sharing Bhutan's progress as well as highlighting some of the challenges which I believe is faced by many others as well, and that's the need for collective efforts. May I now open the floor for the distinguished delegate of Bangladesh who is going to join us on the Kudo platform. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon to you. We can hear you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates and officials from UN staff. On behalf of the government of Bangladesh, I would like to upload the actions and projects we are undertaking in order to implement the SDGs. Different ministries, with the help of UN agencies, NGOs, etc., are trying to reach the SDGs goals 1, 4, 5, 11, 16. Keeping in mind the indicators, we're working with an action plan and we set target milestones for achieving those goals. Ministry of Women and Children Affairs vision is a society with gender equality and child protection, and mission is establishing the rights of women and children and women empowerment through mainstreaming in development. These are aligned with goals 5, 11, and 16. To address the challenges, we are strengthening gender responsive budgeting. We develop an information portal to encourage positive competition among the attachment departments and organizations. Developed a mobile app called Joy to provide instant support to the women and children victims of violence. A national helpline 109 call center established where victims can report any sort of violence and immediate action would be taken. Madam Chair, maternal health, family planning, addressing gender-based violence are some of the issues of the International Conference on Population and Development. ICPD's visions is well reflected across the SDGs as an accelerator to leaving no one behind. Bangladesh has made sustained progress in several key areas such as economic growth, poverty reduction, gender parity in primary school, under 5 mortality reduction, and gains in life expectancy at birth. To end all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere, we have formulated several acts such as National Women's Development Policy 2011, Children Marriage Restraint Act 2017, etc. Ministry of Women and Children Affairs has taken action promotion women's economic empowerment through skill development trainings with traditional and non-traditional tests such as motor driving, agriculture, nursery, horticulture, and etc. We feel the need for a monitoring framework for the Asia Pacific indicators. On that note, I would like to end my speech. I hope for a fruitful session. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much, Bangladesh, for your statement highlighting the national efforts, particularly targeting the women and children, and thanks for sharing the valuable insights. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from Iran. Iran, you have the floor.
Hello, greeting from Tehran. First of all, thank you for giving me the floor. And second of all, congratulations on your election as a chairperson, Ambassador Samantha. Let me say some report about my country. Iran has made considerable progress on indicator framework on program action of ICPT, such as reduction of maternal mortality, vaccination coverage, and births attended by skilled health personnel. The Islamic Republic of Iran persisting on the way to achieving population development goals, especially in areas related to rapid aging, environmental and disaster risk, and unemployed, which need to be appropriate responded through effective remedial measures. Coronavirus pandemic draw intertwine and interconnection of the international community. We believe multilateralism in national, regional, and international level can strengthen interdependence. The response to and recovery from COVID-19 requires global solidarity and international cooperation. Unilateral coercive measures which are contrary to purpose and principle of UN Charter and international law, multilateralism, and the base norms of international relations. UCM have an undeniable impact on human rights as they impede the full realization of social and economic development and hinder the well-being of population in the affected countries, in particular women, children, including adolescents, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. UCM undermines right to health and well-being as they include access to medicine and medical technologies, equipment, and supplies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegation of Iran for her valuable thoughts shared with this committee. May I now ask whether there are any further member states or associated members who wish to take the floor at this point? It appears not the case. So I wish to now invite the representative of the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, to make a brief statement. UNFPA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you, and it is a pleasure to be able to join you for the discussion on the monitoring framework for the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. The Asia and the Pacific region has made substantial socioeconomic transformation. However, at the current pace of progress, the region will not achieve the SDGs by 2030. Rising inequalities have resulted in increasing poverty, insufficient access to health and social protection services, which has been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. These inequalities have reminded us that no path to 2030 will be successful unless we ensure that our efforts reach all, especially those who are left behind. The ICPD Programme of Action articulated a bold new vision about the relationships between population, development, and individual well-being, resulting in a major shift in attitudes in regard to sexual and reproductive health, including family planning, as well as population growth, and by linking social development with sustainable economic growth and sustainable environment and promoting policy coherence, the ICPD Programme of Action in many ways was a precursor to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Being able to monitor and report on our progress is all the more important to ensure that policies and programs are implemented in an integrated manner to leave no one behind. The monitoring framework will not only contribute to strengthening accountability for implementation, it will also help foster the critical linkages between ICPD and the 2030 Agenda and provide us the opportunity to learn and to adapt our approaches as well as build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic. Responding to the recommendation by the midterm review of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development for a region-specific monitoring framework, this voluntary reporting framework will help us to ensure that ICPD continues to be monitored in this region and reinforce the importance of taking holistic and rights-based approaches to population and development. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank ESCAP for our long partnership and close collaboration in taking forward the ICPD Program of Action in the context of achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative from UNFPA for his views shared with the committee, highlighting the rights-based approach to population and development. I now wish to open the floor for the civil society organizations, and before giving the floor to those listed, I wish to thank the Civil Society Committee for making arrangement among themselves to present, given the time limitation and the situation that we are holding this committee session, to represent 3 civil society organizations. And I have been told that 2 of them are going to take the floor as they are physically present here in the UNCC, and there will be 1 other joining virtually. So therefore, it is my pleasure to now invite the Asia Pacific Alliance for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, APA, representative to take the floor.
Thank you so much. Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, and fellow advocates. My name is Ganu Gurung, and I am making this intervention on behalf of the Asia Pacific Alliance for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Network. The Asia Pacific Indicator Framework is being endorsed by member states at an unparalleled time. We are now all well versed that COVID-19 is exacerbating structural inequalities and laying bare the gender, racial, and economic inequities in our health system. The need for more and better data to drive policy is going on, and implementation of the indicator framework by member states will contribute to this. Sexual and reproductive health and rights is essential health care, but current evidence clearly shows reduced access to HR information, education, and service across the region as a result of the pandemic. Lockdowns have led to reduction in access to contraception, increase in the number of unplanned pregnancies, and a rising need for safe abortion. Young key population affected by HIV are experiencing disruption in assessing HIV prevention services. Sexual and gender-based violence against marginalized, vulnerable groups has been reported across the globe, especially against women and girls, sex workers, and LGBTIQ. And a significant increase in early child and forced marriage is projected. Honorable Chair, a resilient society is one that not just tries to respond to crisis by bringing the system back into balance, but takes the opportunity to develop solutions that brings a system capable of dealing with future challenges. Civil society-generated evidence will uncover inequalities faced by marginalized communities and expose the intersections of different forms of discrimination that compound violence of sexual and reproductive rights. Yet, we are strongly concerned that space for civil society is shrinking through the COVID crisis. Now, more than ever, an enabling environment for civil society is essential for fulfillment of the ICPD agenda, the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Declaration, and the sustainable development of the region. We congratulate the member state on endorsing the indicator framework and offer our partnership in its implementation as one step down the path towards building a resilient Asia-Pacific community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of APA. I now have the pleasure to request APCOM Foundation to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of civil society organizations. To the esteemed members and associate members of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific Committee on Social Development, to the Secretariat, to the representatives from civil society organizations, and to everyone attending this session physically and on the virtual platform, good afternoon. We would like to extend our sincerest gratitude for the opportunity to share our insights on the Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards implementation of the program action of the International Conference on Population and Development, and of the commitments contained in the Asia and the Pacific Ministerial Declarations on Population and Development. We recognize that this framework is a very important milestone towards achieving the goals and the objectives of the Program of Action for the International Conference in Population and Development, and to the Sustainable Development Goals overarching principles of leaving no one behind. We would like to express our support to the draft indicator framework, and we look forward to its endorsement. To the report of the 6th Asian and the Pacific Population Conference has made reference about the needs to address the vulnerabilities, stigma, discrimination faced by individuals and communities based on sex, gender, age, race, caste, class, migrant status, disability, HIV status, and sexual orientation and gender identity. The COVID-19 pandemic has amplified these vulnerabilities in our communities and has demonstrated to us the need for collaborative action across movements. These intersectional vulnerabilities of LGBTIQ persons are well documented by a number of regional and national studies undertaken by civil society organizations in the recent past. Furthermore, a joint statement by various UN experts released on 14th of May highlighted how COVID-19 and the responses to address it have contributed to existing inequalities and discrimination based on SOGIE-SC. Contextualizing this indicator framework to better inform member states of our communities' vulnerabilities during this time is critical as we work towards building more resilient systems that sustain us. We are convinced that the current indicator framework has made many entry points to make it even more inclusive, including thematic areas on poverty eradication and employment, health, sexual reproductive health and services and rights, education, climate change adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, amongst others. We wish to also emphasize that our common goal to leaving no one behind is unattainable if we are not committed to protecting human rights as articulated in the Yogyakarta Principles +10. We also call on governments and other stakeholders to ensure meaningful participation of civil society organizations, including LGBTQI organizations, in moving forward with the draft Asia-Pacific Indicator Framework and other vulnerable populations in various phases, including planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. Civil society organizations that have demonstrated a wealth of knowledge and experience in reaching and delivering sensitive services to marginalized communities and populations. These have been highlighted in the response to COVID-19, which aim to reach vulnerable populations. Meaningful participation of civil society organizations will result in more sensitive processes in data and evidence building. An inclusive and accepting policy environment will also contribute to equality and non-discrimination. We believe that we bring with us a wealth of experience and knowledge about issues and communities that we are working on. We are looking forward to working with the UNESCAP, CSD members, Secretariat, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders to ensure that the framework and the spaces and processes around it is actually leaving no one behind. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative from APCOM Foundation. May I know whether the civil society organization ARROW, Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, yeah, they are going to join us online. ARROW, the representative from ARROW, you have the floor. The representative from ARROW, please unmute your microphone and take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm Saira Charla from the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women. On behalf of civil society, we convey our support and appreciation for the Asia Pacific Indicator Framework. We look forward to the member states for its endorsement. The current framework strengthens linkages between the ICPD Program of Action, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the Asian Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development. We appreciate the holistic approach adopted and would invite for an inclusive gender and human rights assessment at the country level while implementing this framework. We call for data disaggregated for age, sex, urban-rural residents, educational attainment, wealth, ethnicity, migrant status, humanitarian setting, conflict zones and refugees, persons with disabilities, persons with HIV, among others, as relevant to leave no one behind in the region. We urge member states to forge effective partnerships with CSOs to develop regular country progress reports using the indicator framework. And CSO participation is crucial in the collection, analysis, and dissemination of data on communities, and this needs to be recognized. And finally, we would once again reiterate our call for member states to endorse the indicator framework. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative from ARROW. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, with your full support and cooperation, I think we have had a good exchange of views on agenda item 3. We have now time to consider the Asia Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development and of the commitments contained in the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development, and as mandated to this committee by the last commission to consider endorsing this indicator framework as well as the commitment of the ICPD commitments as well as the action plan. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, may I know whether there are any views or comments with regard to this committee endorsing she's here. Yeah, he's here. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we were just allowing time for some consultation, but at the same time, I recognize the distinguished delegation of Japan seeking the flow for online connection. May I request the delegation of Japan to take the floor?
I assume that regarding my request on adding two indicators 341 and 541 to the section aging will not be integrated in the document, and then it will be considered further on the national framework in the future. Is it correct?
Yes, thank you very much for that understanding. I believe that is what I also mentioned in my remarks following your intervention. So thank you, Japan, for that understanding. Yes, these extra commitments are welcome, and since this whole framework is voluntary and as nationally appropriate, we acknowledge the commitment expressed by Japan on those particular items. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I also at this point recognize the distinguished delegation of Iran wishing to join the Kudo platform and take the floor. So may I kindly request the delegation of Iran to take the floor. Please unmute your microphone and the floor is yours.
Chairperson, for giving me the floor. Actually, my colleagues in Bangkok talked with Secretariat and mentioned that in Table 1 and Table 3, page 7 and 11, about the indicators framework, we mentioned that we need to use the international agreed language about the sexual and reproductive health services and reproductive rights in accordance with ICPD and Beijing platform. But I don't know why in this indicator, the Secretariat, because this text is a report of Secretariat, mentioned that sexual and reproductive health services and rights, which we don't have international agreed language about. And when with my colleagues talk with Secretary, they mentioned that they use the Asian Pacific Ministerial Declaration, which not actually not consensus about this declaration. We need to endorse this text, and we need to attention and respect all countries' rules, regulations, and principles. We need to change sexual and reproductive health services and rights to sexual and reproductive health services and reproductive rights, as I mentioned. Thank you very much. And excuse me, another things about the monitoring, which we mentioned in table 3. We need adding the volunteer governments of each member states end of the title. It means that list of indicator for Asian Pacific indicator frameworks, blah, 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 till population and development, voluntary by governments of each member state. We need to add it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Iran, and I propose that the Secretariat take appropriate note of these comments in preparing the report for tomorrow for this committee when we discuss and prepare for adoption of the report of the committee under agenda item 5. Distinguished delegates, I believe we have heard certain comments from the distinguished member states, and I now invite the Secretariat to make a brief response with regard to preparation of the draft report of this committee. Mr. Tata, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to our delegates for their very enthusiastic participation and for their clear views in this process. We have explained the rationale behind how this was prepared, but we will work with the concerned delegations to see if we can arrive at wording which satisfies all. So hopefully we will be able to hammer out a solution which is acceptable to all by the time we have to submit the discussions tomorrow, Madam. And so it's our task, and we will be working with all the interested delegations to explain our position and also to reach a compromise wording on a few things.
So with that explanation from the Secretariat that the language for the decision with regard to the indicator framework and the commitments undertaken on APMD and the action plan will be crafted in consultation with the member states, that the committee wishes to endorse the draft Asia Pacific Indicator Framework for monitoring progress towards the implementation of the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development, and of the commitments contained in the Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development as suggested by the delegations, the amendments that the Secretariat is going to take place. SCAP CSD 2020 slash probably an will there be so tomorrow the amended text will be shown on the screen. It will be ESCAP slash CSD slash 2020 slash 2, the amended version. Yeah. Yeah. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, since we have a little more time that is allocated for this afternoon session, and to economize the work of this committee, can we also take the agenda item 4 on other matters, and therefore we will have time to allocate for the consideration of the draft report tomorrow afternoon. So if there are no objections, I would propose that we take agenda item 4 on other matters as well, and accordingly invite any of the delegations present physically as well as virtually to share if there are any other matters to be considered by this committee. I open the floor. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it appears there are no other matters that the delegations would like to bring to the committee for consideration. Since I see no interest to take the floor at this point, this concludes our consideration of agenda item 4 on other matters. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of the items that we wish to consider for this afternoon. And I thank you, each and every one of you, for your informative statements, which have demonstrated the need to strengthen monitoring of the ICPD agenda in the Asia Pacific as part of our regional efforts to achieve sustainable development and bring an end to, and also to collectively work on the end of COVID-19 pandemic and the particular importance of this framework as a tool to look for the post-COVID social development. This now concludes our deliberations for today. The Secretariat will prepare the draft report of this meeting for our review by midday tomorrow, Wednesday, 21st October. We will then resume the committee tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bangkok time in ESCAP Hall, as well as we will also meet on Kudo and YouTube to consider agenda item 5 on the adoption of the report. I look forward to your participation tomorrow. I now call this, I now state that the committee is adjourned for today.
Just the report. Yes, distinguished delegate of Russia was one time.
Yes, sorry, the distinguished delegation of Russia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Actually, I have only one question regarding the report. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, tomorrow at 12, all the delegates will receive a report by email. And at 2 o'clock, we will gather our meeting here, yeah? So, to discuss the report and the chair summary as well.
Yes. The report, the chair summary is what is going to be adopted is the 2 decisions that were agreed today and the organizational matters of the meeting. The details of the discussions which will be crisply prepared as a chair summary will be circulated after the meeting. So what you will be adopting will be the 2 decisions and the organizational details. So it's a very streamlined report. It will be available on email and also on hard copy. Am I right, Coco? For anyone who wants to pick it up from here at 12 o'clock, but definitely by email. Well in advance, we are keeping the report format extremely simple so that number of issues that need to be considered are limited. So we will be sending it by email to all registered participants of this committee and also by hard copy to whoever wants it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the distinguished delegate of Russian Federation, which I believe the procedure is clarified. So may I now declare that this committee is adjourned for today. Thank you.